My name is Sabrina. I spent $10,000 to rent a luxurious chalet in Aspen, where I imagined my whole family would gather for a warm Thanksgiving filled with laughter. I could already picture the table draped in white linen, the golden roasted turkey in the center, and candlelight shimmering through crystal glasses. But just a week before the trip, my mother sent me a curt message. "Sabrina, it's better if you don't come. This is a family occasion, and you always make the atmosphere heavy." I had been uninvited from the very holiday I had paid for entirely. In that moment, I realized a painful truth. They didn't need me, they only needed my money. And so I did something bold. I had never imagined I canceled the entire trip. What about you? If you were in that situation, would you stay silent and endure it, or would you take action? And where are you listening to this story from, and at what time? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you so much. I sat there, my eyes still fixed on the phone screen, my heart aching yet numb at the same time. That short message didn't just push me out of the holiday, it also stirred up every old memory I had tried to bury for years. Memories from Boston, where my younger sister Eva and I grew up in a 2-story house in the suburbs, with a white porch and a green-painted wooden fence, the kind of picture that looked like the perfect American family. But for me, it was never truly a home. From the time I was little, I could feel the difference in the way my parents treated me and Eva. I was the firstborn, the one who always had to strive to do everything perfectly, while Eva, 4 years younger than me, was always wrapped in protection like a little princess. I remember the nights spent at the kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light, struggling through math problems while my mother cooked and kept reminding me, "Try harder, Sabrina. You have to set an example for your sister." Meanwhile, Eva would sit in the living room doodling, occasionally running in to show a messy little drawing, and instantly being praised with, "My daughter is so creative, so talented." The holidays were always the clearest proof of that favoritism. I remember Thanksgivings, when the smell of roasted turkey filled the house. I was always the first one called into the kitchen to snap beans, wash vegetables, peel potatoes, while Eva stayed on the sofa watching cartoons. My hands turned red from the cold water as I tried to keep up with my mother's commands. "Hurry up, Sabrina, don't keep everyone waiting." But when Eva finally walked downstairs, wearing her sparkling red velvet dress and her hair in soft curls, the whole room lit up. "Oh my, look at my girl, she's as pretty as a doll," my father laughed proudly. No one noticed the sweat on my forehead or the small cuts on my fingers from peeling potatoes. Christmas was the same. I was the one who had to wrap gifts, hang lights, tidy up the tree, while Eva only had to wander around, singing a few carols to be immediately praised for bringing the Christmas spirit to the whole family. One year, I spent an entire week folding paper to make decorations for the tree, tiny silver stars and colorful paper garlands. When I hung them up, my mother glanced over and said, "Well, it's okay." But when Eva scribbled a crude crayon drawing of a Christmas tree, the whole family hung it in the most prominent spot, calling it the masterpiece of our little angel. I began to realize that no matter what I did, it was never enough. If I brought home an A, my mother would ask why it wasn't an A+. If I won a prize in a writing contest, my father would remind me, "But you still need to work on your pronunciation, you're hard to understand when you speak." Meanwhile, all Eva had to do was take part in a school play and read a few lines, and the whole family would throw a party to celebrate. The most painful memory for me was probably a Thanksgiving when I was 16. I had spent the entire morning making the stuffing from my grandmother's recipe, carefully measuring and tasting each step. When I served it at the table, my father took a bite, frowned, and said, "Sabrina, you put too much salt in. You're always so careless." I froze, a cold sweat running down my back. Eva sat right next to him, giggling as she lifted a piece of turkey to her mouth. My mother looked at her and said, "Eva always appreciates everything. You really know how to value people's efforts." I bit my lip until it bled, wondering why at the same table, eating the same food, love could be divided so harshly. My parents always told me I was too sensitive, too difficult. I used to believe them, thinking there was something truly wrong with me. I tried to change myself, to do things better, to be quieter, to earn acceptance. But the harder I tried, the clearer it became. In their eyes, I would never measure up to Eva. They always had a reason ready to praise her, and a reason ready to criticize me. I remember once, back in high school, I won a summer scholarship to attend a science program at a university. I was so excited to share the news, hoping for some praise. But my mother only replied curtly, "If you're gone all summer, who's going to help me around the house?" Just a few weeks later, when Eva said she wanted to go to an art camp, my parents immediately signed her up, even though the tuition was twice as expensive. Little by little, I learned to swallow that bitterness, tucking it away like people shove unwanted items into an already crowded drawer. I grew used to being compared, used to working twice as hard just to receive half the recognition. But that also made me tougher and more determined to stand on my own 2 feet. I still remember vividly the day I got my college acceptance letter. It was a chilly spring afternoon in Boston, and I sat alone on the porch, my hands trembling as I opened the envelope. Inside was a congratulatory note. I had won a full scholarship in communications at a prestigious university. I cried not because I was weak, but because, for the first time, I felt that my quiet efforts had been recognized. Not by my parents, but by the world outside. Yet when I showed the letter to my mother, she only shrugged. "Well, that's good, but don't get too confident. College is hard, you might not last." That sentence etched itself into my heart and became the silent fuel that carried me through the years to come. During my 4 years in college, I managed everything on my own. The scholarship covered most of the tuition and housing, while I worked to pay for my living expenses. I served coffee at 6 in the morning, standing behind the counter with the smell of espresso clinging to my hair, before rushing to class on an empty stomach. I freelanced articles for local newspapers, worked as a teaching assistant, and sometimes took on translation jobs. Every night I returned to my dorm with burning eyes from staying up too late, but inside, my determination was on fire. I would never return to being the not good enough child in the family. I would build a life of my own, independent, unshaken, and not waiting for anyone's approval. I remember once, back in high school, I earned a summer scholarship to attend a science program at a university. I was eager to share the news, hoping for praise, but my mother only replied coldly, "If you're gone all summer, who's going to help me with the house?" Just a few weeks later, when Eva said she wanted to go to an art camp, my parents immediately signed her up, even though the tuition was more than twice as expensive. Over time, I learned to swallow those humiliations, tucking them away like people shove unwanted things into an already overflowing drawer. I grew used to the constant comparisons, used to working twice as hard just to earn half the recognition. But that also made me tougher and more determined to stand on my own feet. I still remember vividly the day I received my college acceptance letter. It was a cool spring afternoon in Boston, and I sat alone on the porch, my hands trembling as I opened the envelope. Inside was a congratulatory letter. I had won a full scholarship in communications at a prestigious university. I cried not out of weakness, but because, for the first time, I felt that my quiet efforts had been seen and validated. Not by my parents, but by the world outside. Yet when I handed the letter to my mother, she only shrugged and said, "Well, that's good, but don't get too confident. College is hard, you might not last." Those words carved themselves into my heart and became the silent drive that carried me through the years to come. During my 4 years of college, I managed everything by myself. The scholarship covered most of my tuition and housing, but for living expenses, I worked part-time. I served coffee at 6 in the morning, standing behind the counter with the smell of espresso clinging to my hair, before rushing to class on an empty stomach, my hands still shaking. I wrote freelance articles for local newspapers, worked as a teaching assistant, and sometimes took on translation jobs. Every night, I returned to my dorm with burning eyes from staying up too late, but inside, my determination burned even brighter. I promised myself I would never go back to being the not good enough child in my family. I would build a life of my own, independent and free, no longer waiting for anyone's approval. When I graduated, I already had an impressive resume and received a job offer from a rising tech company in Seattle. I didn't know anyone in the city. I only had one suitcase of clothes, a few books, and an old laptop. But I believed I could start again from zero. The early years in Seattle were tough. I lived in a cramped apartment, took the bus to work every morning, and spent my evenings studying to sharpen my skills in digital marketing. I worked harder than anyone in the office, taking on extra projects, staying up late to run analytics, design campaigns, and present to demanding clients. Step by step, I earned recognition not through empty praise, but through real promotions. By my 7th year, I had become marketing director, leading a team of nearly 30 people and overseeing campaigns worth tens of millions of dollars. Meanwhile, Eva chose a very different path. She didn't continue with college but got married right after finishing high school. Her husband, Tyler, worked in real estate and made enough to get by, but my family always stepped in to support them further. I knew my parents were still sending Eva money regularly, helping with credit card debt, contributing to a new car, and more. Their reasoning was always the same. Eva needs help to settle down in life, while for me it was, you're independent now, you don't need anyone. On the surface, that might sound fair, but in reality, it was just another way they kept pouring love and attention into Eva while draining it from me. Every time I visited home, I'd see Eva showing off a new designer bag or a trip to Hawaii, with my parents looking at her with pride. When I tried to share about landing a multi-million-dollar project at work, they would only nod half-heartedly, then quickly change the subject to, Eva is about to upgrade her kitchen. Money had never been a real issue for me once my career was established. I was earning a 6-figure salary each year, traveling constantly for business, staying in 5-star hotels, and moving in circles with executives and entrepreneurs. But in the quiet moments, sitting alone in my sleek apartment in downtown Seattle, I still felt something missing. Success in the outside world could never fill the void left by being overlooked within my own family. I used to hope that if I reached a high enough position, they would see me differently. But every time I called home, the conversation always circled back to Eva. I was the busy daughter far away, while Eva remained the heart of the family. Maybe that was why I spent $10,000 to rent the chalet this year. I didn't lack places to vacation, and I didn't lack friends to celebrate Thanksgiving with. But deep down, I wanted to try just once to create the perfect family gathering, where everyone could sit at the same table without distance or division. I thought that if I poured myself into arranging every detail, if I prepared a flawless holiday for them, maybe then I would finally be seen as a true part of the family. I pictured my mother smiling at me in the candlelight, my father raising a glass and saying, "Sabrina, you've done something wonderful," and Eva sitting beside me without being given special treatment. I knew it was a fantasy, but I still wanted to believe. I remember vividly the day I called the resort manager in Aspen to book the chalet. It was a luxury log house tucked deep among the pine trees, its sloping roof blanketed with snow, a wide balcony opening straight toward the majestic Rocky Mountains. The living room had soaring ceilings and a massive stone fireplace, the flames promising to turn the entire space into a warm refuge against the winter cold. The kitchen was spacious, with an oak bar counter and enough room for a whole family to cook together, bake pumpkin pies, and prepare a turkey feast. There were 15 bedrooms, each decorated with cozy quilts and large windows that looked out over the forest. I imagined all of us gathered around a long, white-clothed table, the golden light falling across our faces, the sound of laughter echoing through the room. I thought, maybe just maybe this would be the chance for my family to finally feel like a real family. When I signed the contract, I couldn't hide my excitement. I even asked the manager to send me the latest photos to make sure everything looked perfect. Then I hurried to open the family group chat and typed, "Everyone, I've rented the chalet in Aspen for Thanksgiving. Everything is taken care of, you just need to come and enjoy." I hit send, my heart pounding as I waited for their reactions. And just as I had hoped, the screen lit up immediately. Eva sent 3 heart emojis in a row, my mother wrote. "Oh, thank you, Sabrina, you're so thoughtful." My father added a clapping emoji, and a few relatives jumped in with comments like, "That sounds amazing," and "This trip will be unforgettable." Reading each line, I felt a joy I could barely describe. Finally, for once, my family seemed to acknowledge me. In the beginning, the group chat overflowed with excitement. Eva kept sending links to new dresses, showing off which one she planned to wear for the elegant dinner in Aspen. My mother started discussing which wine to bring. My father said he would prepare a few funny stories to tell at the table. I smiled, feeling relieved. Maybe this time things would really be different. But that happiness didn't last long. Just a few days later, the tone in the chat began to shift. Out of nowhere, my mother wrote, "Sabrina, don't try to control everything. Let everyone do some things themselves." I stared at the message, a little stunned, because I hadn't imposed anything beyond arranging the place. I gently replied, "I only want everyone to feel comfortable, not to control." Then Eva chimed in, "You're always overdoing it. It's just a trip, no need to make it so complicated." I bit my lip, my fingers trembling as I typed, "I just want the family to have a complete holiday where no one has to worry." But deep down, I already knew. For a long time, whatever I did would always be twisted into making too much of a fuss. In the days that followed, the veiled criticisms grew sharper. When I sent a suggested menu, garlic butter, roast turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, roasted pumpkin, my mother replied curtly, "You don't need to plan everything." Eva added, "Are you trying to turn the whole holiday into your own show?" I stared at the phone screen, my hands icy. All my efforts, instead of being welcomed, were treated as a burden. A creeping sense of dread began to settle in. Maybe I had been wrong to hope for anything good from them. The breaking point came with a message on Saturday night, just a week before the trip. I had just finished a long day at the office and was sitting blankly at the table with an unopened takeout box in front of me. My phone buzzed, and the screen lit up with a text from my mother. "Sabrina, it's better if you don't come. This is a family occasion, and you always make the atmosphere heavy." I read the words over and over, my hands trembling. A hollow roar filled my head, followed by the sensation of someone squeezing my heart. I had been uninvited from the very holiday I had paid for. That luxurious chalet, the warm wooden house where I had pictured my family gathered together, had become the place from which I was excluded. I sat frozen for a long time, my eyes burning. The pain wasn't only from being shut out, but from the message beneath the words. To them, I wasn't part of family time. I was just the one who poured money into making their perfect holiday, while my presence itself was a burden. After all these years, the same cycle remained. They only wanted what I brought, not who I was. Outside, the rain fell softly, droplets racing down the window like a meaningless competition. The takeout box sat untouched, the cold teriyaki sauce mixing with the leftover morning coffee into a floating, nameless smell. In the silence, I opened the photo album the manager in Aspen had sent, the balcony blanketed in snow, the living room with its stone fireplace, the gleaming kitchen, the bedrooms with thick quilts. Each picture felt like a small, precise jab at the softest parts of me. I pictured the scene again. The whole family gathered, the fire crackling, the warmth of wine on our lips, my mother seated at the head of the table, my father telling stories, Eva laughing, and me standing up to pour more wine, smiling, nodding, trying to convince myself that I belonged. Then my mother's message flashed in my mind like a neon sign. "Sabrina, it's better if you don't come." Those two words, "don't come," felt like icy rivets pinning me to the chair, fixing every memory into a picture so sharp it could no longer be denied. I felt betrayed in a way I knew all too well, not the loud kind of betrayal, but the silent, polite, tidy kind, written in the voice of family logic. They only needed the trip. They only needed the atmosphere. They only needed the perfect photos. As for me, I was the noise, the one who made things heavy. In my head, one sentence rose as clear as if someone had whispered it into my ear. "They don't need me, they only need my money." At first, that thought choked me, then opened into a vacuum stretching from my chest to my throat, forcing me to breathe deep, like an athlete finishing the last lap. I tried to rationalize, the way I had done for years. Maybe my mother was just stressed, maybe Eva was irritated, maybe they didn't mean it, maybe I was overreacting. But the more I searched for gentler explanations, the more I realized there was nothing to soften here. Some truths don't need to be shouted to be real, they only need to be repeated long enough, often enough, in the right places. Their favoritism was exactly that. Repeated, steady, wearing me down, until one day it carved itself into me like a permanent crease. I stood up, poured myself a glass of red wine, the one I had planned to bring to Aspen and open on Thanksgiving night, and took a sip. The bitterness spread across my tongue, then warmed as it slid slowly down my throat. I looked around my kitchen, at the copper pots hanging neatly, the chef's knife with its worn engraving, the darkened wooden cutting board. All of these things I had bought with my own money through late nights at the office, through rewriting campaign proposals for the 9th time, through meetings where I swallowed back tears as family emails arrived with words like, "We're having dinner to celebrate Eva this weekend. Drop by if you're free," as if I were just a passing guest. And now, even the holiday I had paid for had no place for me. I scrolled back through the group chat, up to the first messages when I announced I had rented the chalet. Eva's hearts, my father's clapping emoji, my mother's thank you. Symbols like bursts of confetti, bright and colorful, but when the paper falls to the floor, the room is still empty. Their gratitude had always been like that light, fleeting, falling without ever landing, pretty but never warm. I asked myself why I had still been foolish enough to believe that this time would be different. I set the glass of wine down, leaned against the kitchen counter, and closed my eyes. Images of my childhood flickered past like a fast-forwarded reel. My hands in cold water, washing potatoes, Eva's laughter from the living room, my mother's voice steady but sharp. "Sabrina, don't overdo it." My father's slight frown as he tasted the stuffing I made, the empty chair beside me at every dinner because I was always in the kitchen. All of it rushed back and layered over tonight's message, forming a complete picture. They had never wanted me at the center of anything. They wanted me useful, not present. I opened my eyes and drew in a deep breath. The raw sting of pain had passed, leaving behind a numb burn like a healing scab. And on that numbness, slowly and unmistakably, another layer of emotion rose: anger. Not the quick, explosive anger that dies out fast, but an anger with order, with memory, with numbers, with receipts, with a name and address. Aspen Chalet, $10,000, a card in my name, a confirmation email in my name, a cancellation policy I had read carefully. That anger coursed through me like an electric current, illuminating every corner. I had bought a shared dream with my own money, and they had cut me out of that dream with 2 words: "Don't come." If this were a business deal, I was holding a contract with a blatant breach of good faith. If this were a marketing campaign, the sole KPI togetherness had failed, and the cause lay in the core target audience family who had no real demand for the product, my presence. Those dry comparisons somehow steadied me. I had spent my whole life trying to please them. Maybe it was time to use what I did best to protect myself: reason, facts, and decisions. I thought about value, a word my work forced me to weigh every single day. What was my value in their eyes? A walking credit card, a logistics coordinator, a cushion so that Eva and my mother would never feel the rough edges of life. And what was their value in my eyes at that moment? A string of sugar-coated demands, a family occasion redefined for their convenience, a room full of people with no seat for me. The truth was stark. I had paid for a place at a table that was never truly mine. And when they asked me to step away, they expected me to leave quietly, like a polite servant, closing the door softly so the family atmosphere would remain undisturbed. At that thought, I laughed, a short, dry sound, like the pop of an empty bottle. I was no longer 16. I was no longer the 22-year-old girl behind a coffee counter, hands shaking from hunger. I was a 35-year-old woman who had built her life from nothing, who had learned how to read contracts, how to negotiate, how to walk away from meetings where I wasn't respected. And I could walk away from a family meeting like this one too. But walking away wasn't enough. Somewhere inside me, a calm voice spoke. It's time to take back the decision. I set my phone on the table, opened the confirmation email from the resort, and reread the cancellation policy. The terms were clear. Cancel 3 days before for a partial refund, cancel 7 days before for a full one. I still had a week. My finger hovered over the call button next to the manager's name, then paused. I heard the ringing tone stretch out in my ear, my heartbeat keeping time with each pulse like a drumbeat before a battle. Then, a warm, professional female voice came on the line. Good evening, this is Alpine Chalet Aspen. How may I assist you? I took a deep breath, my hand gripping the phone as if letting go would make me fall into an empty space. Hello, my name is Sabrina Williams. I have a reservation for the Thanksgiving holiday next week. I'd like to cancel. The words left my mouth light as air, but inside my chest my heart pounded so hard it felt as if it might break. On the other end, there was a brief silence before the clerk's polite voice returned. Yes, Miss Williams. I'll check that for you right away. I listened to the sounds of typing, papers flipping, a mouse clicking. In those few short seconds, my whole body went rigid, waiting for a verdict. Images of Eva and my mother flickered through my mind. They were probably packing their suitcases with excitement, choosing outfits, picturing the perfect photos they would take in that chalet. In just a few minutes, that entire vision would collapse, and they would have no idea why. My fingers tightened until the edges of my nails pressed into my skin. Yes, I've found your booking. Aspen Ridge Chalet, 7 nights, 15 guests, total price $10,000. Because you're canceling within the 7-day window, you'll receive a full refund to the card you used for payment. Her voice was steady and professional, but to me each word landed like a hammer blow, severing the rope that had bound me. I heard myself say, "That's right, please cancel it completely." One beat of silence, then the sound of typing again. All done, Miss Williams. The reservation has been canceled. We'll send you a confirmation email right away. The funds will return to your account within 3 to 5 business days. Is there anything else I can help you with? I closed my eyes and felt my chest open not with joy, but with a cold kind of relief, as if I had just cut loose a cord that had been choking me for far too long. No, thank you, I said softly. That's all. Ah. When I put the phone down, the apartment suddenly became so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Inside me, there was no more panic. Instead, a strange calm spread outward. I didn't cheer, I didn't laugh, I just sat there with my hands resting on the table as if I had just signed a new contract with myself. From this moment on, I was no longer my family's walking wallet. I had the right to decide where, and with whom, my time and money were worthy of investment. I opened my email and saw the notification from Alpine Chalet already waiting. The words, "Your reservation has been cancelled," glowed on the screen. I read them over and over, feeling both real and unreal at the same time. In my mind, I pictured the scene when my family arrived, suitcases dragging across the snow, the door locked, the manager shaking his head. "I'm sorry, this booking has been cancelled." I imagined every detail. My mother frowning with blame, Eva's eyes brimming, my father rubbing his temples, Tyler cursing under his breath, relatives frantically making phone calls. And me, I would be thousands of miles away in my own apartment, lifting a glass of wine, silent. The rush of adrenaline still lingered, as if I had just done something almost too bold. A part of me wanted to text them, to shout, "I cancelled it because you cut me out." But another part, the rational, grown-up part, won out. I whispered to myself, no, let them find out on their own. My silence would be the sharpest answer of all. They had treated my presence as a burden and my money as a given. Now they would find out what it felt like when both disappeared. I stood and walked to the tall glass window, looking out over Seattle at night. The streetlights stretched out like golden stars, skyscrapers rising like giant blocks of stone, and in the distance, a curtain of rain blurred the bay. I felt small, but no longer invisible. In that stillness, I realized a truth as clear as the city lights. I had just done something I hadn't dared to do in over 30 years: say no to my family. Not with words, but with action. My heart was still racing, but it no longer carried the frantic beat of fear. It was the rhythm of anticipation, like the drum roll before a play begins. I knew the coming scene would be chaos, filled with blame, maybe even tears, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I felt confident, even expectant, because this time, I wasn't a supporting character. I was the one rewriting the script. I smiled faintly, poured myself another glass of wine, and whispered inwardly, "Let them discover it on their own." They would come to understand that the Sabrina they knew was no longer the girl who washed potatoes, wrapped gifts, paid the bills, and sat quietly at the corner of the table. I had placed myself at the center of the story by stepping out of theirs and by choosing to create my own Thanksgiving. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke up in my small apartment in Seattle with a strange kind of peace. Outside, the drizzle fell softly, a veil of mist wrapping the city in a thin blanket. I pulled back the curtains, took a deep breath, and told myself, today will be mine. No more chasing after family expectations, no more bending myself to please anyone. Instead of standing in a chalet kitchen serving a feast to people who never valued me, I stood in my own kitchen, beginning to prepare a warm celebration I would call Friendsgiving. I took the marinated turkey out of the fridge, its skin already infused with butter, garlic, and rosemary. As I rubbed the mixture evenly across the bird and tucked bright lemons and onions inside, the fragrance filled the kitchen. I slid it carefully into the oven, then turned to the other dishes: a steaming pot of mashed potatoes, a golden skillet of stuffing with sausage and celery, and a bowl of crimson cranberry sauce. The air was thick with the sense of tradition, yet laced with freedom, because for the first time, I was cooking not to prove my worth, but to share with people who truly wanted to be there with me. At exactly 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to welcome a circle of close colleagues. Priya from India, Miguel from Mexico, Lon from Vietnam, and Olena from Ukraine. Each had brought something from their own culture: Priya with a fragrant vegetarian curry, Miguel with a tray of hot enchiladas, Lan with tightly rolled, colorful spring rolls, and Olena carrying a sweet honey cake. We laughed as we laid the food across the small dining table, which instantly became a vibrant canvas of the world. As we sat down, each person shared their own reason for gratitude. Priya spoke about how her family had pulled through the pandemic in New Delhi. Miguel said he was thankful to be able to send money back to his mother in Oaxaca. Lon smiled brightly and shared that she was grateful for finding a community in Seattle. Olena's eyes shimmered as she spoke about her family staying safe amid the smoke of war. I listened, sipping my glass of red wine, feeling warmth spread through me. For the first time in my life, I was at a Thanksgiving table where I wasn't compared, judged, or treated as a burden. I was simply myself, and my presence was fully welcomed. Amid the laughter and the scent of the turkey slowly roasting in the oven, my phone began to buzz nonstop. I glanced at the screen, my mother's name lit up, then my father's, then Eva's. A string of missed calls formed a growing list. I set the phone down on the table, not in any hurry to answer. But then the screen lit up again, this time with a message. I opened it. The words flashed, "Why is the chalet locked?" Before I could react, another message from my father came through. The manager said the reservation was cancelled. "Sabrina, what is going on?" And then Eva's long text, riddled with exclamation marks. "Do you know we're standing outside in the snow? Everyone is freezing, the luggage is dumped all over the yard, the kids are crying. Explain this right now." "How?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, then let a faint smile curl at the corner of my lips. Just as I had imagined. The vision they had of a perfect holiday had burst like a soap bubble, leaving them shivering in the mountain cold. I pictured my mother stomping her feet in the snow, Eva screaming at Tyler, my father fumbling with his phone as his hands shook in the icy air. The image didn't bring me glee, but it did bring me clarity. I had been right. They had never valued me, they had only valued what I provided. And when I withdrew that, their helplessness was exposed. The phone kept vibrating, the ringing growing frantic. I switched it to silent, turned it face down, and went back to the table. My friends were still laughing, unaware of the storm unraveling in my family group chat, and I had no intention of telling them. I poured more wine into everyone's glasses, the aroma of garlic butter turkey filling the room, laughter mingling with the clink of silverware on plates. I took a sip of wine, the mellow bitterness sliding down my throat, and without thinking, I smiled. In that moment, I realized this was my true Thanksgiving. Not a $10,000 chalet, not glowing lights staged for Instagram, but a small dining table, dishes from around the world, and people who looked at me with gratitude simply because I was there. No one told me I was too sensitive. No one pushed me out of the frame. There was only pure joy, born from sharing food and stories. By 3 in the afternoon, the turkey was roasted to a golden brown and placed in the center of the table, its aroma filling the entire room. Together, we carved it, passed the plates, and filled every silence with laughter and conversation. My phone sat untouched on the kitchen counter, its screen flashing on and off with new calls and messages piling up, but I no longer cared. I had chosen silence, and never had silence tasted so sweet. That evening, after my friends had left, I cleaned the kitchen while soft jazz played in the background. Glancing at my phone, I saw dozens of unread notifications, voices of panic, anger, and blame waiting behind the screen. But instead of trembling like before, I simply picked it up, pressed the button to darken the display, and set it aside. I poured myself one last glass of wine, sank into the sofa, and looked out the rain-streaked window. The city still glowed, the rain still fell, but inside me, the storm had finally gone quiet. It was the first time in my life I had a Thanksgiving. I was truly grateful to myself for having the courage to step out of the toxic cycle, grateful to the friends who sat at my table, and grateful for the silence I chose. A silence stronger than any protest could ever be. In stark contrast, my family's holiday unraveled into chaos. By 8:30 that night, the group chat had turned into a raging flood. After being refused service by the manager, Uncle Larry wrote, "Everyone, I found a motel at the base of the mountain. Cheap, 4 hours drive from here. Not nice, but it has rooms." My mother immediately replied, "Book it, everyone head down the mountain." Then came a stream of instructions. "Bundle up, the roads are slick. Tyler, check the tires. Eva, get the kids into the car first." I pictured the caravan of headlights snaking down the pitch-black slope, red taillights glowing in the wind, windshield wipers scraping against the glass. In my mind, another image flickered: the long table in the chalet, white linens, golden candles, crystal glasses, all reduced to an illusion. Their perfect holiday now redirected toward a neon sign blinking, Pine Hollow motel vacancy. Close to midnight, my mother sent a short video. The motel room was cramped, with patchy beige walls and a musty carpet. The windows were shut tight, yet the sound of wind still whistled through. On the bed, Eva's 2 children curled under the blankets, their eyes swollen from crying. On the nightstand sat a hastily baked frozen pizza, its cheese stringy and uneven, next to a cheap bottle of soda. My mother panned the camera around, her voice both weary and bitter. "Do you see this? This is our family's Thanksgiving. No turkey, no table, just frozen pizza in a cheap motel." She paused half a beat, then sharpened her tone. "All because of your selfishness." I stared at the image of that pizza and suddenly remembered when I was 16, 17, the stuffing I made that was called too salty, the empty chair beside me at dinner. My fingers numb from the cold water in the sink. Strangely, those old memories softened, like a faded bruise finally changing color as it healed. My father's message was shorter, but its weight was heavy. "You did something terrible. I'm ashamed in front of the family. Call me back." I read each word and felt the same old family soundtrack playing again: blame, accusation, urgent demands, and finally orders. But I no longer felt any need to dance to that tune. I stood up, brewed a pot of hot tea, and let the scent of mint warm my hands. Outside, Seattle's rain fell steadily, like a lullaby. I leaned against the doorframe, my back supported by the solid wood, and suddenly realized my chest was rising and falling slowly, deeply. I was at peace. Near 1 in the morning, Eva tried a video call. I didn't answer. A message came right after. "Do you even know what today is? It's family day. You killed it. You always ruin everything." Then came a flood of texts from relatives, Aunt Patricia complaining, "I drove 6 hours up here because you said there was a chalet," cousin Mark grumbling, "Wasted so much gas and time," and even a cousin I barely ever spoke to chimed in, "Sabrina, start acting like an adult." I scrolled through them all as if walking past a bulletin board in a busy lobby, loud, full of words and arrows, but none of the arrows pointing at me anymore. They could slap any label on me, but labels only stick if I hold them in place. And I had let go. The next morning, my mother called, and this time I answered. For a moment there was silence, then the sound of her steady breathing. "Sabrina," she said slowly, "I don't understand why you did this." I replied calmly. "I canceled because I was excluded from that trip." She went quiet, then snapped. "But it was family. You always make everything so heavy." I answered, "You said that exact line when you uninvited me." Both sides fell silent. I heard the hum of the motel's air conditioner crackling through the line, imagined my mother sitting on the edge of the bed, her hand pressed against her forehead. "You're selfish," she said, her voice breaking. "You wanted revenge." I spoke slowly. "No. I set a boundary. You want my money, but you don't want me. From now on, the two come together or they disappear together." She let out a long sigh, then hung up. At noon, my father texted, "Your mother is crying. Are you satisfied now?" I stared at the screen for a long time. In the past, those words were the rope pulling me back into the kitchen, back to the table, back to my seat on the sidelines. Today, it was just a line of text on a white background. I set the phone down and opened the window, letting the damp, cool air rush in. A clean scent filled the room, the smell of rain and wet wood, and I felt myself anchored in the present, no longer trapped on that staircase in Boston years ago. By evening, the group chat had gone quiet. Maybe they were exhausted. One last photo appeared, their Thanksgiving in the motel, a tiny square table, 3 plastic cups, a half-eaten pizza, and a few limp French fries. Eva's caption read, "Holiday ruined." Underneath came the chorus, "So awful, unbelievable. Poor kids." Not a single word about my mother's uninviting message a week earlier. Not a mention of the fact that I had paid for something they planned to claim without me. In their version of the story, I was the storm, and they were the snowbound victims, but strangely, I no longer felt the urge to defend myself. I didn't need another family tribunal. I had already delivered my own verdict, and I had enforced it. 3 days after Thanksgiving ended, when I had just returned to the office in Seattle, sitting in a glass conference room high above Pike Street watching the traffic below, my phone started buzzing nonstop. A flood of messages came from my mother, then my father, and finally a long email full of exclamation marks. I opened it, and everything circled back to the same familiar demand. "Sabrina, you need to reimburse the family so we can rent another place for Christmas. If you want to make up for what you did, then you should cover it this time. Don't be selfish again." The tone hadn't changed, still orders, still pressure, still treating my money as an obligation. No mention of having excluded me, no acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. To them, the story was simple. "We need a vacation home, Sabrina has to pay." I sat for a long time, eyes fixed on the screen, neither angry nor surprised. In truth, I had known this moment would come sooner or later. But instead of trembling as I once would have, I felt a sharp clarity settle inside me. I remembered the moment I called to cancel the chalet, the sound of the keyboard, the clerk's confirming voice, the sensation of cutting a rope that had strangled me for too long. I had done something I had never dared before. And now, I knew this was the time to draw one final boundary. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a cup of hot tea before me, the phone placed neatly on the table. I called my parents back, putting it on speaker so I could hear even the sound of my own breathing. My mother's urgent voice came through first. "Sabrina, finally you called. You know we can't let Christmas turn into the same disaster as Thanksgiving, right? You have to take responsibility." I didn't interrupt her. Then my father cut in, his tone stern. "You caused this, so you must fix it. Either reimburse the money so someone else can rent a place, or you rent one yourself. That's the least you can do for the family." I inhaled deeply, straightened my back, and answered evenly. "I already paid once, and I was excluded from that trip. There won't be a second time." There was silence on the line, as if they couldn't believe what they had heard. Then my mother's voice rose, sharp. "What kind of way is that to speak? Family is family. Money isn't as important as keeping everyone together." I smiled, though my tone remained steady. "If togetherness mattered, why did you text me? Better if you don't come. If family truly is family, then love comes before money. But clearly, to you, I'm nothing more than a wallet." My father growled, "You're ungrateful. All these years we raised you, paid for your schooling." I cut him off, my voice firmer than it had ever been. "I went to school on scholarships. I covered my own expenses by working. I built my career myself. Everything I have today didn't come from your support, but from the lack of it. And it was because of that absence that I learned how to stand on my own." I paused, breathing slowly, then continued. "I will not put another cent into holidays where I'm not welcome. From now on, there will be no more financial support, no more attempts to buy love. If all you want is money, look elsewhere. I will keep my love for people who truly value it." My mother burst out, "You're cruel. You're abandoning your own family." I closed my eyes, and a memory washed over me. 16 years old, sitting on the stairs, listening to laughter in the living room as Eva sang Christmas songs while I clutched my math notebook. Back then, my mother had said the same words, "You always make everything heavy." I answered slowly, "I'm not abandoning. I'm stopping the trade of my own self for a place that was never meant for me, though." A loud thud came through the line. My father must have slammed his hand on the table. Then there was only silence. At last, my mother's voice cracked. "You'll regret this." I ended the call without replying. No more tears, no more trembling. Only clarity. I had drawn a boundary they could never cross. That night, I silenced my phone, placed it in a drawer, and put on a soft jazz record. I sat on the sofa, letting the gentle light fall across the green rug. An unfamiliar peace settled over me. I knew that from now on, Christmas, Thanksgiving, or any other holiday would no longer chain me to the cycle of hurt. I would choose the places and the people worthy of sharing them. I would no longer try to hold together a toxic family with money or sacrifice. Inside me, a new decision began to take shape, to focus on my own life. I thought about my work, the projects I truly loved, the group of international colleagues who had given me a complete Thanksgiving. I thought about the trips I could gift myself, the little houses by quiet lakes, the simple gatherings with friends that didn't need to be elaborate to feel warm. For the first time, I saw a future that was bright and clear without the shadow of my family hovering over it. I stood up and opened the window, letting Seattle's cold air rush in. In the distance, Christmas lights blinked on another building. I drew in a long breath and felt my heart beating slow and steady. An old chapter had closed, and I had just set pen to the new one. A chapter of freedom, of boundaries, and of self-love. After that final call with my parents, I began a habit I had never dared before. Every morning, before opening my work emails, I brewed a cup of hot tea, stood by the window overlooking the misty Seattle skyline, and asked myself a single question. How will I be kind to myself today? That small question gradually became the thread leading me to therapy. I found a therapist named Mariah, whose office was a sunlit room on the third floor of an old red brick building. The walls were covered with watercolor paintings, and in the corner stood a deep green monstera plant. In our first session, I told the story of the chalet, then drifted back to the winters in Boston, to the empty chair beside the dinner table because I was still in the kitchen, to my mother's voice saying, "You're too sensitive," to the dull look in my father's eyes whenever I tried to explain myself. Mariah listened without interruption, occasionally nodding, and ended the session with a sentence that left me still for a long time. A family can be a place where we are loved, or a place where we learn to live without love. The first isn't your fault, the second isn't your destiny. From that day, I went to see her every week, learning to name things I once thought didn't need names: favoritism, dependence on approval, the people-pleasing syndrome, the fear of abandonment. Mariah taught me a deceptively simple but difficult exercise. When I heard the words, "I'm disappointed in you," from my mother, I should ask myself, but am I disappointed in how I treat myself? The first time I repeated that in front of the mirror, my eyes burned. The 10th time, I felt my shoulders release. The 30th time, I heard a calm answer rise in my chest. No, I'm learning how to stay loyal to myself. From therapy, I began to bring small changes home. I taped a note above my desk. Family doesn't mean control, boundaries mean strength. I practiced saying short, complete sentences without justification. "I'm busy today." That doesn't work for me. No. When a project at work demanded the team work overnight because a client changed plans at the last minute, I proactively redesigned the timeline, set clear rest hours for everyone, and was surprised to see the campaign run smoother than before. When a longtime colleague casually tried to pass off the hard parts of a task under the banner of sisterhood, I smiled and suggested splitting the work and marking responsibilities on the Kanban board. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't a cup always being poured from. I was a spring with a source, aware of rainy seasons and droughts, and of how much flow was right for those who came with open hands, not for those trying to pull the whole stream their way. On weekend nights, I opened my kitchen to kind people. Priya brought fragrant dal, Miguel taught me how to make fresh salsa, Lan served salmon sour soup, and Olena sliced honey cake as thin as a bee's wing. We called those evenings Thursday table, a Thursday table, to remind ourselves that even in the middle of a busy work week, there was always a seat for joy, for presence, and for the question, "What are you grateful for this week?" Sometimes I was grateful for a morning without rain, a steady burning candle, or a paid email for my therapy sessions. Sometimes I was grateful for the silence in my apartment, where the old soundtrack of guilt no longer echoed. I also learned how to walk alone. In late spring, I rented a small cabin in Leavenworth, bringing along 2 books and a thick sweater, hiking through pine forests to the sound of a creek. There, I wrote a letter to the 16-year-old girl inside me saying, "You've done enough. From now on, I will stand at the door and not let anyone hurt you anymore." I folded the letter, slipped it into my pocket, and smiled to myself. Never had the phrase, "I'll take care of it," felt so light. Time passed. Autumn returned, and Seattle turned golden orange along the rows of maple trees. A year later, Thanksgiving arrived on a rare clear morning. I woke early, opened the window to let the cold wind in, turned on an old Chet Baker jazz playlist, and placed the turkey on the tray. The scent of butter and garlic filled the kitchen again, but its meaning was different now. I was cooking not to earn a seat at someone else's table, but to invite those who had always saved me a place in their hearts. I set the table with earth-toned linen, a few sprigs of eucalyptus in a glass jar, and wine glasses polished until they reflected the sky outside the window. My friends soon arrived, Priya with a platter of crisp chaat, Miguel with a bottle of mezcal tucked under his arm, Lan beaming as she carried a tray of pandan flan, and Olena wrapped in a wool scarf, holding a basket of dark rye bread. We pulled up extra chairs, extended the table with a wooden board, and turned my small apartment into a banquet hall glowing with warmth. To Sabrina, Miguel raised his glass. The one who taught us that family of choice isn't just a slogan, it's a creation. I laughed, clinked my glass, and listened to the crystalline sound like rain and sunlight tapping against a roof. We shared our stories of gratitude for the year. Priya said she had dared to turn down an exploitative project. Lan spoke about taking a long leave to visit her family in Saigon. Alina proudly shared that her mother had just learned how to use video calls. Miguel said he had reconciled with his older brother after 3 years of silence. When it came to me, I simply said, I'm grateful that I've learned how to choose myself without asking anyone's permission. The table fell silent for a beat, then erupted in applause, not loud, not showy, but full, like an embrace. Evening fell, and the kitchen glowed hot with the oven and laughter. Someone switched on a string of lights around the doorway, their golden glow spilling over our shoulders. I carried out the turkey, the knife slicing through its crisp skin with a gentle crackle, mashed potatoes fluffing beneath the spoon, cranberry sauce streaking deep red across the white plates like a bold brushstroke. We ate slowly, spoke slowly, leaving spaces between words to really listen. At one moment, I looked around and saw everyone bent forward, not toward their phones, but toward laughter. And I realized, this was the image I had tried to buy for decades, and in truth, the moment I stopped paying for places that had no seat for me, it came on its own. After dinner, we carried blankets out to the balcony, gathered in a circle around a small electric fire pit, warming our hands, watching the city lights below move like schools of glowing fish swimming through the streets. Someone told a silly story, and we all burst into laughter. I leaned back in my chair, drew in a deep breath of cold air, and Mariah's voice echoed in my mind. Happiness isn't loud, it endures. When everyone left and the apartment settled, only the soft hum of the dishwasher filled the silence like waves. I stood in the kitchen, washing the last glass, warm water slipping through my fingers like a lullaby. Then the phone on the table lit up, buzzing hard, flashing with dozens of missed calls from Mom, followed by a flood of messages. I dried my hands, walked over, and read the words as they poured in with a calm detachment. Sabrina, where are you? Do you know this day is for family? You're awful. Call me back. Are you coming for Christmas? The words flickered like dying embers, bright enough to remind me of an old harbor, but no longer warm enough to draw me back. I set the phone face down, a natural smile spreading across my lips, not triumphant, but the smile of someone who has just laid a stone firmly in place on the bridge they are building. I dimmed the lights, lit a scented candle, and placed it in the center of the table now scattered with a few crumbs. The small flame stood tall, unwavering. Before bed, I wrote a few lines in my journal, words I also want to leave with those of you listening to this story. Sometimes, to find your own worth, you must dare to step away from the blood family that poisons you. Not to deny where you came from, but to protect where you're going. Not to seek revenge, but to stop wounding yourself. I closed the notebook, drew the curtains, and slipped under the covers. Outside, Seattle's rain began again. I closed my eyes, listening to the steady rhythm on the roof, like the heartbeat of a city that holds me without demanding anything in return. On the table, the phone lay face down, silent. In my chest, my heart beat slow and steady. And in the warm darkness of my room, I knew I was finally home.